I received review copies of several games from Bez and others I have previously bought at retail. Bez Shahriari is the creator of Gigamic's hit game Yogi, a game where you pick up a card, then follow its instructions positioning the card about your person or contorting your body in the manner indicated. The instructions on the cards accumulate from turn to turn, and as soon as you're unable to follow them all, you're eliminated from the game. It's a very simple premise. It's one of those ideas that feels like it must have existed forever, lightning in a bottle for a board game designer. The game, Yogi, and its creator, Bez, have been a source of inspiration for me throughout my design career. I've always been intrigued by designing at the lighter end of the gaming spectrum, and Yogi is just about the simplest, most intuitive game that I know. In 2021, I backed a Kickstarter project for Whimsical Creatures, or to give it its full title, a game about whimsical creatures and trying to identify them after someone makes a noise. In this game, you lay out 5 cards, and one player has to make a noise corresponding to one of the creatures in the display.
Blab. Blab. Blab.
The other players have to guess which creature that noise related to. The scoring is pretty irrelevant, but it's extremely generous. You score a point for a correct guess, or if your noise is guessed correctly, but you also score a point if you guess the same as the majority of players, whether your guess was correct or not. It's not a groundbreaking mechanical twist, but I'm highlighting it here because it clearly illustrates Bez's commitment to accessibility and joy in games. Where so many party games rely on players laughing at each other's failures and failures of their own, Whimsical Creatures simply asks players to make silly noises and enjoy the absurdity of it all. The purpose of this video is not to review Bez's catalogue of games. The rules are so simple and transparent, it will be immediately clear to you whether you're going to enjoy this stuff or not. But I did want to highlight Bez's unique approach to design, distribution, and self-promotion. Game designers are creative folks, and that creativity can extend to the business of board game production, not just the gameplay. And I hope that this video provides some inspiration for your own development as a game maker. I generally promote the most pedestrian route to market, licensing to publishers and letting them do all the work. But Bez has proven that there are certainly other avenues worth exploring. I first met Bez at UK Games Expo some 8 or 9 years ago at the playtest tables. I signed up to test In a Bind, a prototype game full of offbeat hand-drawn cards, where players would contort themselves according to the instructions on the cards. Sound familiar? I immediately recognised it as resembling Twister, but in the form of a card game. And Bez enthusiastically told me that a big feature of this game was that it was far more accessible than Twister because it was played seated around a table and it only required contortion of your upper body. I enjoyed the game and I fed back that I thought it would be a great drinking game, but I couldn't see much broader appeal. Bez screwed up her face a little bit and told me that the game had great commercial potential and that it was fun for anyone, not just drunken students. And Bez was right and I was wrong. I purchased a copy of In a Bind upon release and it got played a lot. It went down well with every group I introduced it to, and players would frequently go on to buy their own copies. It was a big hit around the Cardiff gaming groups. It was championed by our local game store Rules of Play as a very affordable, very funny party game. In 2016, I was invited by Bez, along with many other designers and artists, to attend a convention in London which Bez was calling BG DevCon. The premise was that the attendees were to give talks, or micro-talks, on their specific area of interest. Whether you spoke for 3 minutes or 30, everybody was invited to contribute. And crucially, no playtesting was allowed at the event. This was a day all about ideas. Another example of Bez's subversion of established norms in the board game industry. It was a very exciting and stimulating day, and it was repeated a couple of times over the next few years. Since the start of the pandemic, Bez has streamed daily video discussions with other designers, artists, and industry folk. Cardboard Edison highlighted Bez's work at the end of 2021 as their pick for Best Board Game Design's social feed. Yogi was released in 2017 by Gigamic, and along with Rob Harris and his fantastic Playtest UK network, Bez has built up a community of designers who looked out for each other. I believe it was a fellow designer, rather than Bez herself, who actually pitched In a Bind to Gigamic and other publishers. I remember finding myself promoting the game to a Hasbro Game Scout when it turned out that she had no interest in my own prototypes. We had a few minutes left in the meeting, so why not try a little bit of matchmaking? As it turned out, Gigamic was a perfect home for Yogi, and it's become one of their biggest sellers. The sequel, Yogi Guru, can be played as a standalone game or mixed in with the original, and it features ideas that I remember from Innerbind Junior and the Innerbind expansion pack. Diverging a little from the original concept, Yogi Guru brings the lower body into play and also gives players a little more control over the tasks forced upon their opponents. In Yogi Guru, a card might require you to have your right hand touching blank, and the other players fill in the blanks. Every game Bez produces is a passion project, and I can imagine that hand-drawing each card must create a strong bond between creator and product. I sense that over recent years, Bez has come to terms with the commercial side of the industry and is more open to big opportunities like the one which cropped up for Innerbind. Nonetheless, Bez continues to produce offbeat little games, put them up on Kickstarter at an alarmingly affordable price, and send them out from the local post office. Each game comes without a box, just a deck of cards packaged in a small plastic baggie, and Bez refers to these as Bezzy budget bags. Whimsical Creatures cost me $5, but you could download the print and play files for £1. Again, with accessibility in mind, Bez has decided to keep costs as low as possible. The most recent Kickstarter project was a game about quickly grabbing creatures that are totally different and counting your beetroots. Another Bezzy budget bag. This one once again features hand-drawn art and cost $5 or £1 for print and play files. It's a speed pattern recognition game. Cards are laid out on the table face down and players race to turn over cards and find creatures which are totally different to each other, taking those cards into their hand. Each creature has certain characteristics: the number of eyes, number of arms, number of legs. You need to keep the cards you grabbed in order because they're going to be checked at the end of the round. And if you have two creatures next to each other which share the same number of eyes or legs or arms, then you've failed, and the player with the most cards wins. Now, I love this sort of game. It's very reminiscent of Pick a Pig from Jolly Thinkers, where players race to pick up cards from a table with exactly one difference from each other: their size, colour, glasses or popcorn. But Bez's game has a clever little twist: counting your beetroots, or turnips, or radishes, depending on the version that you purchased. Throughout the game, you can always grab a vegetable, because that's totally different to a creature. But you can never grab two in a row, because they're not totally different to each other. And you must not have more than 5 vegetables in your hand at the end of the round. This small addition to the game brings it to life. It greases the wheels a little, makes the whole thing a tad more forgiving, but the challenge of remembering the number of veggies in your hand against the backdrop of chaotic creature grabbing is very engaging. It's refreshing to know a designer who isn't preoccupied with selling thousands or hundreds of thousands of copies of their games, though ironically, Bez is one of the few designers I know who's actually achieved that with her game Yogi. Each of Bez's Kickstarters has attracted a few hundred backers, enough to create a warm community feel, loyal fans who talk to each other and feed back their own ideas into the designs. Bez's most enduring project is the ELL Deck, initially released in 2017 as Wibble++. This is a system with many different playable games, and new ones released regularly. Most of the games are not actually designed by Bez, but by a number of different collaborators. Every card in the ELL Deck features 2 letters, a number and a border, and the range of playable games is diverse. There are spelling games, wordplay, storytelling and pattern recognition. Categorical is one of the headline games. Created by Tom Cauldron, this game sees 2 players or teams competing in a tug-of-war over 5 cards laid out in a face-down row between them. The players agree on a category, for example, animals or films, and the central card is revealed. Both teams race to say a word starting with one of the letters relating to the chosen category, and the fastest to call out a correct answer wins. They flip over the next closest card to their table edge, and the previous card is replaced with a new face-down card, and the game continues with players flipping cards face up and trying to work towards their own table edge. If one side calls out a correct answer for the card closest to them, they win the game. My favourite ELL Deck game is a puzzle by Alex Cannon, created exclusively for Twitter. In total, 6 cards are revealed and a target number is set for the players. Each letter on a card scores points equal to the number on the card, and players are tasked with coming up with a word which scores a total equal to the target number chosen at the start of the round. It's challenging, but it's doable, and a similar level of thinkiness to something like Wordle. I always enjoy it when Total pops up on my Twitter feed, and I'd really love to see a rule set developed to play with the physical deck. During the We Whimsical Creatures campaign, Bez discussed an idea for a new game whereby players would draw creatures, then take turns to complement the drawings, and then to complement the compliments. I've saved this game until last, not just because it's the most recent project, but also because it's a project which captures perfectly Bez's design principles. Each player is given 3 cards describing different creature features, which they must include in their drawing. There's also one communal feature at the centre of the table, which every player must draw. Drawing the creatures is a fun activity in and of itself, and the creatures you create could even be used in your own personalised version of We Whimsical Creatures. But I digress. There's a whole second and third phase to the game. Firstly, once all the drawings are complete, everyone takes a turn to complement the various drawings of the other players. And to finish off, each player selects their favourite compliment that they received. It's a weird and satisfying twist on the tired formula used in games like Cards Against Humanity or Snake Oil. I've never been a huge fan of games using the judging mechanism for scoring. Party games have frequently forced players to score their friends based on who's the funniest. A game about drawing creatures, complementing the drawings, then complementing the compliments is unique in that the players are not scored on their wit, but on their kindness. And before it all gets too cloying, I should point out that it often ends up hilarious regardless, as players work extremely hard to find something, anything kind to say about the asinine scribble that's been presented to them. Currently, most of these games are available through Kickstarter campaigns or direct from Bez either at conventions or through online sales. And I'm quite sure that it won't be long before Bez happens upon another piece of bottled lightning like Yogi and once again attracts the attention of a major publisher. But in the meantime, it's fun to watch a fellow designer explore the lighter end of the board game industry. If you want to follow Bez's work or find out about upcoming streams, you can follow her on Twitter @StuffByBez. And if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel, hit like, and I'll see you next time. All the best.